And go live, we're ready.
Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For those members of the public who wish to watch or participate in this meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at the Southborough website, southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Okay, now let's take a roll call for quorum. Markelier.
Here.
Luttrell here. Watson.
Here.
McKee.
Here.
Divers.
Here.
Savidovich.
Here.
LeVolt.
Here.
Steins.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Very good. We have quorum. So our first item is to walk through the spreadsheet that Judith sent, or I sent out, that Judith put together, that shows the 2008 goals compared to what our current goals are, and make sure that everything from 2008 that we find still to be relevant, that we also have in our current master plan.
So why don't I'm happy to kind of try and help everyone navigate through this. So just to clarify though, this is actually, if you, for those of you who can remember this far back, we did two different things with the 2008 master plan information. We, as a group, looked at the recommendations, and this was all about recommendations and not goals. We looked at the recommendations that had been completed or where the sponsoring committee had made a decision that those recommendations were not viable, weren't practical, and therefore they were never going to be done. So that was one group, and that data is in the shared folder. We were then left with a set of recommendations where they either hadn't started or they were in progress. And one of the things we discussed doing was just going through them and seeing whether or not we felt they were still relevant or not relevant within the context of the new master plan. And we did talk about that at a couple of meetings, but we then kind of put it to one side while we focused on trying to shape out the objectives for the 2020 master plan, which was, you know, what we wanted to do at the back end of last year into this year. So this spreadsheet is comparing that second group of 2008 recommendations to where we are today on the 2020 plan. It's not, because the ones we've already completed or we said were never going to be done, there's no point in going back over those because we know the status on those. So this is, if you like, the rump of what was left from 2008. And what I did was, let me just Oops, why am I doing that? That was not a good idea. Sarah, can you let me share?
Sure.
Can I share? Oh, yes. Oh, host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, Mimi, you're the host, so you're gonna go in. That's
Oh.
why I don't have some of my functionality that I need. So you're gonna go in and you're gonna click on screen share, and then it's gonna say who can share screens. There's like the little up arrow.
Should I hit all panelists?
All panelists, yep, and then you're all set. Then Judith will be able to share her screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, everyone see that?
Yep.
I'll have to zip it backwards and forward, but so basically, just to orient everyone on the index, there's 4 categories that I put in here. One's where, as I went through the 2020 master plan, it was pretty clear that if the wording wasn't exactly the same, certainly the recommendation intent was there in the new master plan, which is good. So within someone's, it was a related recommendation in the 2020 plan, but not exactly the same as 2008. There's the kind of peachy ones. Those are ones where I just simply didn't have enough information to know whether or not they were already taken care of. And those are ones I would definitely want to go through tonight. And then the ones that are in white, I couldn't find a good mapping between them. And it might be because they've already been done, or because we decide that they're irrelevant, or we might decide to add them. So that's really what I think would be helpful to come out of tonight's session, is just to see if we can clarify around these peachy ones and then talk quickly about the white ones, because those are the ones where I think if we can do that, then we can really say, okay, we've got a truly robust set of recommendations. Everyone good?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
I don't see peachy colors.
I just want to do that. Okay. So what I did is I took the recommendations out of 2008 and actually put them into the categories that we're using in 2020, just to make that mapping a little bit easier. So we'll start with the commercial activity. So mixed use projects in the business village and business highways. We've actually got a couple of references there. So I think those are probably taken care of. So shout up as I go through this if anyone disagrees or wants to kind of add something. Advocacy and encourage mass highway participation and study of the Route 9 corridor. We don't have any specific recommendation to go back and ask for kind of state involvement there. What we've got is develop a collaborative Route 9 plan with area towns. So I guess we could just update that to kind of be area towns and, mass highway if we wanted to. Like, what does everyone think?
I would just expand that to develop collaboration, the Route 9 495, somewhere there, development plans with surrounding towns. I would just include the 495 because that is going to be a big focus coming up. I don't know if we want to say Route 9, 495, 90. I know they're talking about that whole corridor.
And a lot of state money going into that process. I mean, I think it seems to me that we're not going to have a whole lot of influence on it, but the objective ought to be to stay connected with it and participate in it because it is going to be important in terms of what happens for Southborough, and we may have opportunity to influence in certain ways that could have significant impact on Southborough. So it's less than us driving it, it's us watching and participating and trying to sort of look out for our interests as that process develops.
But to Tom's point, is that the Route 9 development? Is that the Route 995 development plan? Is that how we should clarify it?
Yeah, I'd actually include it in one big bucket. Again, it's state highway, and I even say 495 Pike development, Route 9, the whole interchange area out there is going to have a lot of updating over the next 10 years or so here, apparently.
Okay.
So again, not so much for action for us, but observation and targeted participation.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Great. Okay, so the next four, and actually the last one in the section, were really around boundaries and zoning. And we've got a kind of a general reference to zoning, but what we talked about in previous meetings was only adding zoning if it was going to be a dependency for one of the other objectives that we had, as opposed to saying, well, we want to look at all sorts of different zoning. So I don't know if any of these have already been kind of looked at by the planning board and thrown out, or if they're still on the table.
Off-street parking, we haven't looked at.
Okay.
I can't really, I know we figured out how to make this bigger last time, and I've forgotten.
Okay, I mean, I can make it bigger, but I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it in the.
You should also, Mimi, at the very top, you should say, it says you are viewing Judith Watson's screen, and then to the right of that it says view options, and there's a pull down menu, and you can choose like 150, 200, 300.
It'll just change your view, but not anybody else's.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it would make it so that you could see better if you.
I'm not coming down yet. I'm not coming down.
I mean, I actually remain very interested in the zoning along Route 9 linked into potential revenue generation along Route 9. There's our quorum. Bill has the quorum right there. So, is one woof for yes and two woofs for no?
I'll translate for
Good.
you.
Hi, it's Kristen. For those that don't know, I'm from Rec, Kristen Laval. For the newbie here, could you explain line 12 to me, specifically to provide more depth? Is that physically more depth? I'm just curious to understand that one a little bit more.
I have two directions there, Kristen. One is potentially more depth to the business village district along Route 9. And second, height, in that as we think about opportunity for revenue generation through taxes, when we build new residences, we basically lose money. And so the opportunity is to increase density along Route 9 for commercial enterprises in a thoughtful, tasteful way. And there are some things that we might think about doing in that direction, but one of them is to go up with zoning. So now I think it's 3-story limit. And if we went up to 4 or 5 and found developers who were interested in building along there, that could increase our tax base along Route 9 potentially. So
But
that's not the only way, but that's a way to do that.
But I think the depth in this line item means the physical depth, because our business highway is very, very narrow. But I don't know how you increase the depth when you're surrounded by properties.
Right. That's why I was trying to picture where that might be applicable. And I think that's what.
Yeah, couldn't do it all the way along, but there are places that might work. Mimi, your sound is off. You're not muted, but can't hear you.
You know, my family never ever has that problem. They've never told me that they can't hear me.
Uh-oh,
And
my
it
goodness.
happens a lot on Zoom.
Yes.
I don't know. To me, I don't think that that's really still an applicable goal, because most of the business highway is surrounded by residential. And we're going to start, you know, taking residential properties and rezoning them as business highway. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Well, there are not many residential properties right along there. I'm trying to think. I mean, it depends on how far back you go, as a matter of fact, but there are places that you could expand as I think about going along there, for example. East of Oak Hill Road, for example.
There are neighborhoods up there too.
Yeah, not there are some certainly, but there's some distance to move up there, I think. Anyway, again, if it's possible, it's interesting. It may not be possible, but I think it's worth keeping on the list.
Anyone else? Any other?
Let me, are we after the big objectives here, or lots of, any objective we might think of?
No, well, okay.
Is this a priority or is this less than a priority?
So these specific ones. There were 5 zoning related recommendations from 2008 that were not either completed or substantially worked on. Okay.
Right. Understand, but should this be, is this a major issue that should be carried over, or a more minor issue? How do we view
That's
it?
what we're trying to kind of establish if we want to keep it on here. Because if we're going to keep it on here, it'll end up being assigned, I guess, to the planning board, Mimi, yeah?
Right. I mean, I would just offer that, it's Kristen, that if we don't even have any specific places in mind where this would even be applicable, it seems like it might be noise in the overall plan.
I would agree.
Yeah, I would too. And I think that we were talking about trying to have, you know, less goals and recommendations, so the chances that they're implemented is greater than the 2008 plan was great, but it had, you know, 200 and something goals, which is, you know, kind of overwhelming.
Also agreed. I think that, you know, this is definitely something that we could note in the new plan to say that we're acknowledging that that was a goal at the time, but that, you know, it's not a priority, you know, at this moment. Just to acknowledge that it was there, but it's sunsetting for something else.
I mean, the other way maybe to look at this is to say, as we go through and start building out the implementation plan, and we have talked about identifying the recommendations that we want to say are a priority, let's say the next 1 to 2 years, if those recommendations have got zoning implications, then we can define a kind of a zoning kind of dependency attached to that, rather than saying, well, let's start with zoning and then work out what we can do. I think to Kristen's point, it's like if we've got a project or an opportunity that needs a change to zoning, then that's where we would focus our efforts, as opposed to, you know, because we know from 2008 that we weren't able to get a wholesale zoning kind of refresh and update through.
I agree.
How does everyone feel about that approach?
I like that approach. I think
I
anything
like
that
it too.
streamlines is good.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Right, just let me, okay, so this one here, more foot traffic, encourage the appropriate scale and design in the business village district. So there were a lot of subsections to this here, and the only one that we've kind of really defined out at this point is improving the infrastructure related to the train station. But I'm just wondering if we now can define a more specific objective for that downtown. That I wasn't able to join the joint board call the other day, or meeting the other day, but have we got something that's kind of emerging out of that in terms of a specific plan or kind of set of projects for that downtown now? Which
Yeah,
I think
I
they
think
called
so.
the business village district in 2008 is what we now call the downtown.
Right. And again, we're expecting to see a draft of a zoning bylaw update very shortly, later this week here. In fact, tonight I thought was due. So I think there is progress. I was encouraged. Mimi, I don't know what your read on the conversation was, but I thought that was good progress to get some traction on this.
Yeah, so in the joint meeting, it was agreed that we were looking for small scale mixed use development in the downtown area. And that's going to be, it's going to be a standalone for mixed use. So it's not going to affect the other village business districts that we have.
I don't understand.
You know, I think all of the upgrades with the new sidewalks, you know, could be called out as kind of an action item that's, you know, been ongoing and that's happened, you know, since the 2008 plan was written. Because I know that I really enjoy the new sidewalks. I think they're great. You know, I walk at lunch sometimes, you know, in downtown. So, you know, I think that that's definitely a positive thing to add to this document, just to kind of show, you know, how Southborough is continuing to move forward on objectives.
Okay.
Sam, I referenced in a letter to the Board of Selectmen this state walkability initiative. And it would seem to imply that not only do we want to join within the business district or within the Southborough Center area, but we also may want to connect in some way with other elements of the city, other parts of the city, all revolving either around sidewalks or bike paths or other things of that nature.
Or trails, absolutely. And I think there's a strong interest in terms of connecting the train station to office parks, for example. The state actually has money to do those kind of things. And so just accessibility through town and to trail networks in surrounding towns, for example. So Kat and the Trail Committee has been working hard on that one. So I think there's a sort of a global accessibility, interconnectability theme that we ought to keep on the forefront.
And I think at some point in time we've discussed, in this group, we've discussed almost all of those issues in one form or another.
Right.
And it would be interesting to make sure that we not only include foot traffic, but other non-vehicular traffic in an objective, and potentially then reference that kind of objective as part of trails or any of the other areas that we want to look at.
Yep.
Mhm.
Board of Selectmen was actually talking about a bike committee to
Yeah,
with
so
the
there
trails
are,
committee.
I mean, there
Great.
are a number of recommendations around bikes, around foot traffic, around trails, around linking different routes in the accessibility connectivity section. This recommendation from 2008, I think, really just talked specifically about the business village district. So I think what I'm hearing is once we've got we can kind of refine the business, the downtown one. This one is kind of taken care of. in other recommendations. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we got a whole section on accessibility and connectivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're talking about foot traffic within a 150-foot area of a small downtown is one thing. But really, the whole objective, if they want to encourage business, that sort of thing, is to include or to link that area with other, let's say, residential areas, et cetera, so that people throughout the town could get access to the business district.
Exactly. And that's section rows 31 through 40 in here. It looks to me like we've got a fair amount
Yep.
of
Improve
places in there.
accessibility and connectivity.
Connect all that.
Hmm.
But again, very important set of
Okay.
issues.
Okay. All right. So that's commercial diversity. Let's go on to housing. Again, similar situation in that there's definitely, I'm just going to do the green and the peachy ones first. There's a specific reference to identifying sites for creation of affordable housing through new development, redevelopment, or preservation, which I think speaks to these two areas.
Agreed.
The one in peach, which I hoped Andrew might be here, but if not Andrew, maybe Tom. There's a very specific reference here around using CPA funds for a variety of affordable housing strategies. And I didn't see any reference to the use of CPA funds in the housing recommendations.
Well, that's so just a little background, and I know Sam is well versed on this too. So one of the things the SHOPSI is doing is going to put on the regular town warrant to move funds on a yearly basis from the CPA, because part of the CPA is dedicated just for affordable housing, into the Southborough Housing Trust Fund. The reason why we're doing that is right now, SHOPSI has no money. Even if a property comes up, we have to wait for town meeting to get approval to do anything. And by that time, the property owner already bypassed or sold it to something else. So we're just setting up a mechanism. A lot of towns around us throughout the state puts it into their housing trust fund. SHOPSI can't spend it without the authority from the housing fund, the trust fund, but at least that way there, if something comes up, we can enact on it a lot quicker. So long funded way of saying we are continuing to use the CPA funds, in this case, for affordable housing strategies. SHOPSI doesn't have it for the diversity of housing. That's kind of outside. If a diversity of housing has a affordability component, of course, we'll go for that. But strictly for a diversity of housing type of thing, that's out of SHOPSI, and I don't know if that's even allowable under the CPA rules.
Tom, that would be the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yes, the affordable housing.
Weren't the CPA funds going there, or did they stop? Because they were at one time.
That could be in history. All I know is normally we have a lot of housekeeping tasks at town meetings, transfer this fund, that fund, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that SHOPSI wants to do is add that to our yearly warrants of housekeeping to move, X amount of funds to the, I'm sorry, Sam, thank you for that, right fund.
Trust Fund.
Thank you.
I don't think there's much money in there now. I actually happen to be on that. I guess several of the selectmen were appointed to that. We don't do much as far as I can tell so far, but I don't think there's a big pot of money sitting there now, but I think the concept is a good one, to have money that we can spend if an opportunity arises without going back to town meeting.
Exactly, and that's so part of the diversity of housing is, yes, to continue the CPA funds and a variety of affordable housing strategies. And those are the A, B, C, D, and E is just, like I said, different types. So when you say, in the rose color or the peach color, recommendation include and diversity of housing, I think that's more of an Andrew question, because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you can use CPA funds for diversity of housing. You have to use it for their specific buckets that they have, and
Okay.
I don't know about
It has
buckets.
to be affordable housing.
Right.
Okay.
But I've heard, Tom, that there is a pot of money, like $750,000 or a little more, sitting somewhere for housing. Is that still in
Yep.
CPC?
That is still in the CPC. Well, it's in, yes. To answer your quick question, yes.
Okay, so that's the money you would like to send into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Correct. And any money on an ongoing basis
Right,
gets
okay.
to the trust fund. So it just gives us, it gives us a little bit of nimble, I guess, makes us
Right.
nimble to do something.
Yep. If you send it to the trust fund, can the trust fund send it back to CPC, or is it just a one-way transfer? I
I
don't
think
know
it's
why you want to, but
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a one-way transfer.
okay.
Again, this is money allocated specifically for affordable housing. It
Right.
cannot be used for other things.
Okay.
It's not
So-
like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul here.
Right.
Right, yeah.
So I guess if that's been happening and you're looking to try and make it more efficient, then this objective is really, I mean, it's already kind of ongoing and happening then. So
Yep.
there's
Yes, it's going to be happening in the very near future. That's an active
Let's
okay.
project.
keep it in so we can take credit for it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's put it in that we're going to do this, and then we check it. That we're done.
Well, it just, we can put it in that we've already done it, so it makes the 2008 one look better. As Bonnie said, it's all about taking the credit for it.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
maybe change it in the beginning to continue to use the CPA funds with a recurring I'm trying to think of
Annual transfer of CPA
Yeah.
housing money to the Affordable
Yes.
Housing Trust Fund.
and then we can definitely check that off as a completed task.
Okay.
Even though
Perfect.
it's not done yet, but
But that's what we're running to that goal right
yeah,
now.
next town meeting, whatever that is.
I was going to ask, is that something the town meeting has to vote on? I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't,
Yeah.
but okay.
Yep, typically.
Okay. And then the other ones, I guess I put these down as because they were zoning. Is this the same situation as we talked about on commercial? That if there's specific objectives that have a zoning dependency, that's what we'll call out rather than specifically focusing on zoning?
I think it's related to the top ones, like you said. Without some kind of changing in the zoning, that flexibility can't happen.
Agreed.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Robust and resilient services. Shared wastewater disposal, small package treatment tanks. I know we've talked about this, but the only recommendation that's in the current version of the plan that says make stormwater management and wastewater systems work, which might be a bit unspecific anyway. So do we want to try and refine that one a little bit? Is there anything happening, Sam? Because I know this was one of your pet projects, wasn't it?
I've talked about it. Yeah. I mean, I think from a specific standpoint, I guess my thought there is that we have opportunities given improved technology, certainly over the last 10 years and likely going forward, to do localized wastewater treatment plants. So one of the things, for example, that people have talked about is if we can figure out how to get that parcel of property behind the House of Pizza, that one could put a small treatment plant in there for the downtown area, for example, or develop other, again, specific wastewater treatment plants for commercial development along Route 9, potentially. So I think, at least my thought was that we want to continue to take advantage of technology to do those kind of things as we develop, given that it's extraordinarily unlikely there's ever going to be wastewater town-wide.
Okay.
Question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
Sam, I mean, we've talked about that parcel of land behind the House of Pizza before, but for the wastewater treatment facility, because I actually live in an association that has one, if we're talking about the same, one of the things we don't like, and one of our stresses, is the reserve that we need in case something should fail within the plant. I mean, you know, you hope that it doesn't, but if it does, it could be costly. So what would be the plan there?
The simple answer is I don't know. But what I do know is that a lot of places actually are doing this successfully. And again, I don't know when that plant was built, but it's got to be at least 10, 15 years ago, is it not?
Oh, more than that, yeah.
Oh, it's going to be 20, I think.
Yeah. So there have been significant advances in technology since that time. And you know, again, I've done a fair amount of reading about it. I don't read a lot about, you know, disaster issues in terms of failed systems, et cetera, that create major problems. Certainly can happen. There's no guarantee, but at least my theory is that the engineers can figure out a way to make that fairly robust. And the one in Weston, for example, that we looked at, which is a pretty interesting one. What they do is if they've got a storage tank, and if there's a failure, they pump it until they can get it fixed. So I mean that, you know, that kind of backup, which is sort of brute force, but there are ways to deal with failures.
Yeah, but it's expensive, I guess,
Yeah.
is what I'm. And granted, you're right. I'm talking about a 20 plus. I think it's probably plus years. You know, we weren't here then, but I think that's how old the association is. And you know, we have had pump before for whatever reason, and it was, you know, it's not cheap, and so that's just why I kind of wonder about that aspect of it.
Yeah, that is a
I'm
risk.
not saying we should remove it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm probably getting into too much detail, but that's just what came to my mind when I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been interested in, and I don't know how possible this is, but you think about possibility of hooking into the MWRA system for Route 9. We tried it a number of years ago for the town-wide, and it was too expensive, but if you did it in a localized way, I actually happen to be on the MWRA advisory board, and we have recently voted to allow some expansions into non-sewer towns to take more capacity. Deer Island actually has a fair amount of excess capacity at this point, so MWRA is interested in that kind of thing. So again, longer term, bigger picture stuff, but there are some issues that I think are worth investigating. So,
Agreed.
Okay, so we can clarify, or just clarify that kind of yellow recommendation there. Okay. Okay, so these are the following ones were in the 2008 plan, don't believe have been completed or really substantially started, and they're not in the current plan, so the next two. So do we want to add them in, say that they're...
Can you highlight which ones you're talking about?
And which line numbers, Judith?
I'm
The
sorry.
line numbers are helpful.
24/5.
Yeah.
125.
Yeah. Thank you.
You know, that-
Bayville Hall's been sold, so
Yeah.
that's not, well, no longer relevant.
in South Union, we're looking at.
Yeah, the capital plan committee, right?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, those are, you know, interesting things. I'm not sure they have the same priority today that they did 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we kept that, that's almost in direct conflict with what the capital plan committee is proposing.
Yeah. Okay, and you know, my thought on the road maintenance and reconstruction is, you know, we've got a number of recommendations around accessibility and you know, flyovers and bridges, and we can just make sure that the recommendation kind of references, you know, scenic and historic characteristics. So yes, we want improvements, but not at the expense of, you know, their kind of structural integrity, if you like, you know, their impact on the.
These are the things we do as a matter of course, typically. So I don't think
Yeah.
of them as being extraordinary. But I think that you're right, Judith. There are things in other places, like some of the accessibility stuff. You know, sidewalks are part of the road process. And I think there's importance to continue to emphasize that. You know, one of my pet projects is getting pedestrian crossings across the causeways. And again, that's sort of a road project, but that's not what I think of as sort of standard maintenance.
Yeah. Okay.
But Judith, I read that as, I didn't read that as what Sam said. That line 24. And I think this could be still in the master plan. Develop policies and implementation standards for road maintenance and reconstruction, including bridges, which address scenic and historic characteristics. To me, that says we're not going to make a curvy road straight just because it's more efficient. We're going to keep it curvy because it's scenic and it's historic. And I think that should still be in the master plan as a goal of any street development, reconstruction, or whatever. We just don't want right angle streets everywhere. We want historic and scenic curvy streets that were always there. And to me, I read that as saying, we want that as our master plan. We want to make sure we have some policies and standards to make sure all our streets are scenic and historic, and they're not straight right angle, you know, grid type of type of traffic flow.
Well said.
But does that belong more in the sense of community block?
No.
Infrastructure?
It has nothing to do with community, but how the town looks.
So who
Well, that influences community, to Sam's point, but I think
Yeah.
I do appreciate it listed here in the way that it is.
Yeah, I don't object to where it goes, I guess, but it's a good point, Tom. That I was thinking more of, you know, more annual maintenance kind of stuff.
Okay, we can add that in. Okay, next one, line 26. I wasn't sure this. I wasn't sure if this was something that you were already doing through the Board of Selectmen goals. Sam, Lisa, I mean, I did look at those. There isn't anything explicit, but, you know, we've talked about this in relation to our implementation plan. And I wonder, rather than having a master plan recommendation, whether or not we make that an implementation, you know, criteria.
I think quarterly may be too frequent.
Maybe say periodic.
Well, I think you want to be more frequent than periodic, because then it's like you choose, but maybe once or twice a year, maybe more than once. So maybe twice a year.
I'd say, yeah, biannually, I'd support that. I think that's a good idea.
But being
Semi-annually, right?
helpful, yeah.
So that's something the Board of Selectmen has talked about doing, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're working on that. Yeah, in fact, we're working to talk with the various committees individually, and then where it makes sense, get groups together like we did for the downtown thing recently, for example. So
It would be great for the implementation plan too, because to have that sort of cross communication and see where everyone's at in terms of accomplishing their goals would be really good.
our meetings aren't long enough now, so we're trying to
That's right.
Are you guys setting a record or what? I don't remember the Board of Selectmen.
our hourly pay rate is dropping precipitously. That's all I can tell you.
You're starting to look like the planning board,
Uh-oh.
meeting length-wise.
Yeah, but again, I think that's, you know, it's somewhat challenging to do, but I think that's very worthy of keeping it on the radar here and trying to make an effort.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. And then line 27. I mean, that, you know, this goes back to 2008. I don't know whether or not we feel it's still done there.
I think it's still, technology is continuously evolving, and I think I'm just thinking back in 2008, the the bureaucracy to get a transfer sticker back then was unbelievable. Now it's so much, at least streamlined, a lot more efficient. I think that stays in there. That should be a continuous evolution of technology and how forms of government
Can we add the word technology? I think that's really important to Tom's point, because this is very vague. What does this actually mean? And I think if we're talking technology, let's say technology, because that's a really important point here.
Yeah, and get rid of the consolidated finance. I don't think we need specific like that, but I think like what Catherine said, Kat.
It's all the above, Tom. You're right.
I know.
You're just right.
Okay.
Yeah, but still a good point to keep in there that will evolve. I think we've made significant progress over the last 10 years.
I agree.
Keep pushing.
Okay.
Hi, it's Kristen. May I back up to number 26 really quickly? And I apologize because it's kind of like bedtime, so people are interrupting, so I had to go off video for a bit. In addition, and you may already have this, in addition to a goal about getting our boards and commissions and committees together more, what about enhancing just community participation, knowledge of what exists? I mean, I can tell you that most of my my peers have no idea, and that's not good. And that's some could say it's because they're apathetic. I mean, are there any goals about encouraging more participation within our community into the boards, committees, and commissions?
Really great point.
Yeah, Kristen, very good. I mean, we've made periodically some efforts at that, but it is a real uphill trudge to do that. I continue to look at technology as a way to be more communicative with citizenry generally. But again, I think there are no easy answers to that one. So.
But I think having it in here as a goal and objective is really important. Is this the right section? I forget. I can't really see what section we're in anymore, if it belongs here or in another one. Can you remind me where we are?
We're on robust and resilient public services. So it's what is in the state plan. It's what's called municipal facilities.
Yeah. Maybe it's in sense of community is where that belongs.
Yeah.
I was thinking
that
too, but I think to Kristen's point, it should actually be in here, because there could be some very specific actions that we take different than we've done in the past to help solicit feedback and encourage people's participation, or just to get information out to them in different ways.
Well, and God forbid, and hopefully we're not in this state for long, but the one upside of, or one of the upsides I would say, is it's easier to participate now,
Absolutely.
So.
And I think we've talked about this in the past, Kristen, about incorporating some sort of what's happening with Zoom meetings and such, and continuing some level of that too.
Yep.
Involvement and participation.
And again, you could do some things like including when new people move into town, part of the process when they go to the townhouse and register to vote or do other things there, maybe some outreach communication about available community slots. We actually last night appointed a woman who just moved into town the last couple of months to a committee position, extraordinarily well qualified person, and great opportunity to get her involved. And so again, I applaud her for reaching out on her own, but we might be able to do a much better job of informing and trying to do a little sales work for people when they
welcome letter.
Yeah. Welcome to town and sign up for these 3 committees.
You're invited.
Good point to add there in the community.
Okay.
Take a quick action.
The line 28. I don't know enough about the capital planning committee, but is this one really covered by the remit of that group? I know Lisa's on the. I can't see my little squares. I don't know if Lisa's on tonight, but
I don't think so. But Judith, I think that's worth keeping there. We've established it, or we're establishing it, but I'd maybe change it to maintain or something like that. Because the capital planning committee is doing a great job.
Got it.
So is developing and maintaining and get rid of implementation because that's capital plan's responsibility to implement. Is that what you think, Sam?
Yeah.
Generating cash.
I don't think I'm not mute. Hold on.
Okay. I can wordsmith that. Right, the next two, 29 and 30, I didn't find anything. Oops. Oh, that wasn't good. Hang on.
Yeah, I think 29 is less relevant at this point, actually.
Mm.
Not so much the documents, but 30 is interesting. Lisa has actually been working on an inventory of town-owned property that I think that's worth keeping on the map. Less, I think, for things that we might want to do with it as a town, as much as trading it for property that we might want access to elsewhere, for example. So one of the things that I think is pretty interesting is, can we find a friendly 40B someplace and get up to the 10% threshold so we can once again control our own destiny in terms of those developments. And there are not many locations for that, but if we could find property that the town owns to trade somebody who has one of those parcels, that might be an interesting thing. So I think the understanding what we have there in terms of property and including that when we think about other things that we want to do is certainly worthy of keeping on the radar screen.
Okay.
The only word I don't like is rank, because to me that means every year it could be ranked differently. I think maybe assess town-owned properties. I don't want to put a ranking on things. Oh, this is the most important thing in town.
How about evaluate?
Evaluate, yeah. I just don't like the word rank. Sorry to pick on one word, but
Prioritize.
rank stink.
I like prioritize. That's a good word.
Yeah, except that's sort of like ranking too, though.
Well, it's kind of important because evaluate just means review and prioritize means review and choose. And I know you're trying to get away from ranking, but
yeah,
it is kind of important to set forth an objective and a plan. So it makes it more active, it feels.
Yeah, except when I like to prioritize things, but when I prioritize, I need to know what my objectives are. So if I'm trying to figure out what I can sell for the maximum market price, I got one set of rankings.
Okay.
If I'm trying to develop open space, I got another set of rankings. So if I evaluate on a series of dimensions like marketability, open space attractiveness, housing potential, blah, 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 then I can take that evaluation matrix and go through and set priorities depending on a wide range of things
Okay.
I'm trying to accomplish.
Yep.
So
So keep it broad and open. Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to think of it in a way that could be a tool
Yep.
going forward, as opposed to a static kind of thing where you got a list that says this is most important or whatever. So
That sounds good. Okay.
Hi, it's Kristen. Can I, and again, if this is in another section, just tell me. But it was funny, I was actually at a field today, right before this meeting, and somebody asked me about property that the town doesn't own, but things we should be keeping our eye on, specifically the old golf course, Stony Brook. You know, another piece of property that we talk about a lot of time, and actually Rec approached the Board of Selectmen at some point in the past, and we actually asked them to reach out to the landowners, is where the old, oh my gosh, I can't think of the farm stand's name, but that,
Capacitor.
yeah.
Capacitor Farms, yeah.
Capacitor Farms. And so we had actually asked the Board of Selectmen to approach the owner, and this was the previous board, to just feel them out basically in terms of what they were thinking. So are there any goals that capture kind of also evaluating potential properties that the town may want to own for open space, rec, or whatever other reason?
Yeah.
So Kristen, this is Karen. We do within the Open Space Preservation Commission have a listing of kind of potential open space their eye on, and Capacitor Farms is one that has come up often that we probably don't have the funds to purchase. But I think you're right to bring this up. I think the more that we have a kind of clear sense on priority land, particularly from my perspective as it pertains to open space and trails, that would be great, because we don't want that kind of stuff, that kind of property to go into the commercial market without us being aware of it and making a conscious choice about it.
Yeah,
And especially for a place like Capacitor Farms, where I believe it's still the same family owning it, they may feel that they want to make an offer that the town could choose over a developer, for example.
Yeah, perhaps.
we do have that in line 45, I think, for open space at least. And so maybe we broaden that for include recreation or other uses.
There is, I mean, there is in the master plan, there's a very specific objective there, recommendation here. Identify criteria with define goals for strategic acquisition and protection of open space.
But I would, Kristen makes a good point. I would say open space, comma, recreation, comma, other public uses or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that? Just good stuff. Right, where okay, so we're 32 now. So 32 and 33 are both ones that there's nothing really, they're not in the current plan. So the first is reasonable and clear mitigation commitments. Is that something we now do on development projects?
Yeah, we periodically do it. I don't think we do it in as a systematic and thoughtful way as we could or should. But if developers want relief from the town from whatever zoning requirements, etc., sometimes they will agree to make a mitigation payment of some type and amount that we can use to do other things like buy property or make improvements in places. So, so I think it's worth keeping it on the list, but you can't predict it very well because it depends on developers coming in and investing in town. And I think the large development transportation demand management strategy is a good thing to have in here too.
Okay, and then how about 33?
I don't see the purpose of that.
Yeah, there are folks who think that's not a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've got objectives we've got goals and recommendations around linking the different parts of the town. I think this one, I mean, it's kind of.
We can get rid of it.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, we can get rid of it.
I
think
can't imagine us trying to make throughways out of cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, I think it'd be all-
Yeah, Judith, we're going to hook the end of your street there into the Mass Pike, so don't worry about it.
Oh, how super. Maybe you can at the same time work out who it is who's has the garage opener that opens our garage when we're not there. That would be.
Oh gosh.
That's the burglar community. But yeah, I think that 33 is
Okay.
not a great thing.
Right. Let's go. Oh yeah, I think the next two were already covered. So 36. Local scenic roads bylaw. Zoning. See again, it's zoning.
So this is an overlay district, which has been a big topic lately about not necessarily the recommendation of Sam, you can quote her name, was
Judy
not to
Barrett.
create, not to create overlay districts. So it seems to be in kind of direct conflict with some of the more recent advice that we're getting.
Yeah, I guess I take that with a grain of salt. I mean, Judy, 5 years ago was advising overlay districts. And so now those are out of favor, and
We reserve the right to be smarter.
that's right. Good. Or not, as the case may be.
Or not.
Well, we reserve the right to produce ongoing consulting fees. I think that's part of it. As a former consultant, I've made a lot of money off of fads over the years. But I think the issue is simply that whether it's overlay district or not, it's interesting to think about ways to protect the scenic and historic assets in town.
Absolutely.
And overlays actually are attractive in some ways because that doesn't disturb the underlying zoning, which makes people very nervous if you change the underlying zoning, even if you're not doing anything that affects their rights. They always are suspicious that maybe there's something that's going to happen that makes my flexibility less than it was.
So can I ask a clarifying question? If this were an objective, it says consider a local scenic bylaw and scenic overlay district which may provide a no disturb buffer on private property bordering scenic roads. Would this prevent, for example, sidewalks going in on a scenic road where you'd have to take down large, beautiful trees that have been there for 100 years? Would this protect those types of roads from that happening? For the
you could, depending on how you wrote it, but in fact, there are other restrictions. In fact, we're, as we speak here, working on some updates to our tree removal process, which has a lot of protections built into it. We actually haven't been doing them like we should have over the last several years, in my view and other people's views. But I think that there are some pretty good protections for removing trees. In fact, on scenic ways, of which there are like 18 in town, the planning board actually has to have a hearing and approve it to remove a tree. So there's a pretty good protection there for crazy tree removals.
Right. So that's my only concern. If this were to add protections, then I'd be for it for that reason, because there's a balance of adding sidewalks, which I'm fully supportive of. But
Yep.
when you have the scenic views, you can't have both. So you have to choose.
Where it's hard. That's right.
I choose trees.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a true statement.
Yeah, this is hard to do, but I think it's a worthy objective, is to think about preserving this, frankly.
Okay.
So we want to keep this one in?
I'd vote for it.
Well, don't we already have scenic roads, Sam?
Yeah, we have 18 scenic roads in town. The only thing that I'm aware of that does for us is it actually protects the trees along the roads better. There may be other things that does for you, but I'm not sure. And we protect stone walls anywhere.
So,
Well,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
This would be a local bylaw, Bill. What we have are scenic roads that are under Mass General Law. So this would be a local bylaw that would, I guess, add more protection to scenic views and trees.
I see.
Let's keep it.
And
If we
just
don't have it, let's keep it. I mean, if we don't have these bylaws.
What was Kristen going to say? I'm sorry, Kristen.
Well, I just had a question. I mean, anything, if we ever did come up with a scenic road bylaw, we'd have to vote on it in town meeting, right? So I'm a little wary on this one, having seen it for the first time, because I'm just thinking about there's scenic roads, but then there's people who don't have access to view those scenic roads. And so, the example of sidewalks was interesting, but I mean, at the end of the day, we can keep it in, right? Because anything would have to be voted by town meeting. So
Right.
for that reason, I'm okay keeping it in.
Yeah. Any bylaw change, zoning bylaw, et cetera, has to go to town meeting.
Yep.
Okay. So sidewalk pedestrian bicycling committee. I mean,
Yeah.
the sidewalk committee has already happened and is.
Bicycling, not yet, but it's probably going to happen.
So I would get rid of, if you wanted to, well, no, pedestrian and bicycle committee, I think it's strong. And I think you would incorporate sidewalks into that. So I'm in favor of 37.
Okay.
I don't need sidewalks in it. I think the thing for this one is, well, yeah, never mind. Keep sidewalks in because
I mean, I don't care if you keep it or don't, but I think definitely a pedestrian and bicycle committee based on the conversations I've had with Westboro and them having a separate committee for that reason. So it's good.
I mean, we do have a lot of recommendations around accessibility and connectivity that specifically speak to pedestrians and trails and bicycling. And if we don't have, and at the moment, I guess the question is, well, who would take responsibility for those recommendations if we don't have a committee like that? So it does feel like it's a good kind of bridge to implementation to say, let's get the committee started, and oh look, here's your 5 recommendations which you are donated from the master plan committee.
Right. And it is the Board of Selectmen's objective, as Sam had mentioned earlier, right, to form one of these committees. So this would be good.
I'd keep bicycling. That's important for our chairman, so that's one that's probably going to happen. So let's take credit for it.
Yep.
I don't think I ever saw Marty on a bicycle.
He talks a good
We're
game.
all looking now. Who's going to get the picture? It's not real if you don't have a picture.
Okay.
I mean, there are state laws that basically address the issue of road redevelopment to include, that is, would require sidewalk or some sort of access for the disabled.
Yeah.
And you can't have people saying, oh, I'll walk down the curbing or walk on the edge of the road, because that now becomes a mixed use roadway or mixed use access point. And that means that people who are disabled have to have the same sort of access to it as anybody else who might jog or walk along the edge of a road. That becomes a major issue and exposes potentially the town to some pretty severe penalties, or at least the necessity to make some capital investments quickly to rectify problems.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Bill. And in fact, that triggers another thought that we might consider putting in here. We recently voted to adopt the complete streets design approach for roadway and pedestrian and cycling and whatever projects. And that actually opens up opportunity for us to get state funding for those kind of things. That includes the kind of access bill that you're referring to here. So maybe something in here that leverage the town's complete streets status to enhance these capabilities or something like that, Judith, could be useful reference.
Right, because that very program that you're referring to kind of mixes in with several of the things we've talked about, several of the bullet points we've just talked about.
Exactly.
Okay, good. The north-south divide, we've got a very specific recommendation in there. Walking trails are bat and bicycle paths we've got in here. The one that we don't have in the current plan is canoe launch and walking trails along the natural buffer of the Sudbury River and Mill Pond. So, Kat, what I wasn't sure whether or not the work that you've been doing with things like the Burroughs Trail kind of.
So help me understand, where is the Sudbury River that we could have a canoe launch?
It's down by the train station.
Southville Road there.
Yeah.
By the train station. So I thought I tried to find that once, and it was non-existent. It's by the hunting club, right? There's a gun place, a shooting range back there.
No, if you actually follow 85, you go underneath the bridge, the railroad bridge, into Hopkinton, you're going to pass over an old arch bridge, and it's right there.
Yeah. The historic bridges, right?
Yeah, it's right there. It's on
Right
both
there
sides.
somewhere.
You go over water. When you go underneath the railroad bridge, maybe, I don't know, 50 yards, you go over the river.
you leap off the bridge carrying your canoe and fall into the
Well, let's leave it in there and explore, and yeah, that would be great.
Just put canoe/kayak. I don't know if we want to exclude it, one mode, or if it even matters.
Where can I launch my hovercraft? That's what I want to know.
Nowhere. Because it's a very narrow. I don't know if I mean I used to go down that way a lot.
And that's,
Kayak
we
would be
have to
better than a
explore
canoe.
that. Let's go explore and find out what that is. 'Cause
I would love that.
we'll make that happen next spring.
Wait a minute. We expect a report at the next meeting. Hold on, guys.
Yeah, hang tight.
I believe there's a lot of damming issues there because of
Yeah.
Beavers.
yeah.
Oh, beavers.
There are a lot of beavers along the Southville Road to the west of that, as a matter of fact. I know folks who live down off of Bridge Street, Wood
Yes.
Street down there, who complain bitterly about the flooding.
Addressing that problem is not inconsequential because
Right,
beavers are protected animals.
It's very unfashionable to have beaver coats anymore.
Hey,
Well, not only that, they'll shoot you if you have one because it's illegal. You can't kill a beaver without.
good. Don't kill
What were
beavers.
you gonna say, Kat?
Don't kill beavers. But
Oh.
how do we live with them? I'm not sure.
There is a way.
Okay.
If you go down to 9/11, you'll see a bunch of beavers down. You don't see them, but you see they're cutting down trees and stuff.
Yeah, it impedes the flow and causes inundation of various types of land, including conservation land. And if in fact it damages a house, then in fact whoever owns that piece of property, what you have to do is basically apply to the person who has the piece of property to make sure in fact the beaver could be trapped on it. Then you have to apply to the Board of Health, indicating that there's a health issue. If the Board of Health approves, then in fact you can go out and hire at some expense somebody to come in and kill the beaver. You can't do it yourself. I happen to know that because I run into that situation when I was with Sulph.
So 40 is good. I think that's incorporated already into the objectives that we've outlined.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to open space, environmental rec. Transfer of development rights. Mimi, I know this is already in the current plan, and your view was that we should actually remove it.
You know, it's funny because I was just retyping that and trying to text Freddie just find out if she has an opinion on that. I hadn't seen that before, and I haven't heard anything about this, so I don't know that it's still relevant. What do you think, Mimi, as a former member of the Open Space Recreation Commission or Reservation?
Well, I think it's extremely complicated. There are huge legal issues, and we don't have to set aside whole districts that are givers and then a whole different district that are takers, and it's we don't have that much land left here. There's not huge swaths that can become this whole giving district. So I don't really think it's relevant in this town, and it's very complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Off with his head.
I would say we should take it out.
Okay. Right, let me just move this here. Oh, right, this one, I wasn't even sure what this one meant, so.
I don't understand what this one means either. And so you being on the Conservation Commission and me being on the Open Space Commission, and neither of us get this one, I kind of think maybe we should get rid of this one too.
Except Conservation District actually makes it more restrictive in terms of what you can do for development on it.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It sure does.
Yeah, but is there
Can
enough
you add little pieces here and there to a district?
Right, that's my question.
Yeah, it's spot zoning basically.
Right.
Which is not a wonderful idea typically, but
You said it's not a wonderful idea, Sam?
typically not a great idea, but you could do that certainly. I mean, the worst part of spot zoning is dropping a commercial patch in the middle of residential. That's really bad typically. But this, to preserve space in the middle of residential, is not necessarily a bad idea. So.
But if you open the door to one, do you open the door to the other?
No, not well, people would argue that, but in fact, you got to do it at town meeting to change zoning or something like this. So you make your case to say this, deserves this particular treatment, and people.
Can you give an example for what we have now? What would be considered a conservation district? For example, would Breakneck Hill?
I think the only thing in it is like DCR property, isn't it?
Yeah, let me just take a quick look. I was looking at the zoning map. Okay, green conservation.
Is it necessary in watershed property? Is it even necessary?
DCR Town Forest, along Woodland Road down north of the Pike. And
the easiest way to do it, if you want to do even spot addressing spot issues, is putting a conservation restriction on it.
Yep.
Yeah, then you wouldn't need to transfer it to the conservation district.
That's right.
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Because you'd have to look at what the stipulation for each individual property is, because some of the allowed uses in the conservation district wouldn't be allowed in some of the open space parcels.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Next.
All right. Okay. This one is, I think I actually took the action for this one. Yeah, so I believe if we own open space and it's managed or under the care of the Conservation Commission, we already have land management plans.
I was just going to say, I think that 44 is already done, and I think that 45 is already a part of our current master plan.
What about land management plans that are coming up for expiration? So is that just built in once there's a land management plan in place that it would be obviously renewed each year, or should there be an objective to continue the renewal of those plans, or how does that?
So if we use, for example, Chestnut Hill Farm as an example, that land management plan has 5-year duration. It's up for renewal this year, and it's within. I think it's within. It's either in the land management plan or in the conservation commission that it has to be reviewed and renewed. So it's part and parcel of the protocol for that document.
But Judith, if I'm not mistaken, there are town-owned property all over the place, relatively small parcels all over the place. The town may not even remember that it in fact owns it, but there is certainly no plan for those things.
Right. It's one of my hopes for the work that Lisa's been doing to catalog those parcels and figure out what we have and what we might want to do with them.
See, that may be where, in fact, this statement applies.
Okay, so why don't we link it to whichever one that Lisa's doing on town-owned property? Okay, I'll do that. I can link that one in. Okay.
And then 45 is, I believe, already a part of what we had established within the open space.
And also 46
goals.
Because we talked about.
That's right.
Doing that in a more collaborative way.
Mm-hmm.
Protect land contiguous with open space along the base circuit trail. So that one with Cat, I didn't know whether or not we've kind of.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, of what that actually means. Protect land that's along the Bay Circuit Trail. So I would have to look into that a little bit more to understand what that actually means. The Bay Circuit Trail, there's certain sections in Southborough, but I don't know if there's an option to protect the land, or if the land's already owned and developed or just owned by another. So I don't know what the objective was when they wrote this.
Should we broaden that to say to protect land around the town's trail network? Trails versus general trail, all trails instead of just the Bay Circuit Trail?
Well, what do we mean by protect land, first of all?
Right, and yeah, because a lot of the land that the trails are on right now are all owned by DCR, for example.
Mhm.
So the land that abuts these trails will either be private property or, for example, some Fayetteville school property or something like that, or the golf course. You know, so I don't know what that actually means.
I guess my vague recollection of that one from the earlier plan was around the issue of improving access, for example, and you know, limiting things that distracted from the experience on the trails and so forth. Things like parking, I think, in my view, comes in that as well, as part of sort of enhancing the trail network overall.
Yeah,
Relative to
I see that
contiguous
being
property.
certainly very important, but a little bit different than what this states is protect land along
Right.
along the trail. So
So
I'd be in
I,
favor of enhancing this, modifying it to make it a little more general and
actually,
what we look for.
I mean, we could flag it as like, let's explore of all the trails we have now, like if there's an opportunity for that. But I think what we have written out in the plan in the different sections certainly covers the objectives that we have all discussed and the Trails Committee has discussed about what's really important for trails. And I don't want to lose 47 if it's really important. So I'd be open to exploring that a little bit further with a few people that may know what this intention was initially.
I don't even so much care what the intention was initially as making sure that it reflects what the Trails Committee and others believe is important.
Well,
Going
protect
forward.
land that's very important. Did someone have something in mind that we're not thinking about is all I mean by let's explore what the intention was, because I don't want to say, oh, 47 is not important anymore. And I have only been on the committee for 3 years and someone before us really had some, you know, some thought about it that's really important.
Good to check.
I just want
Kat,
to
I think we should definitely double check the Bay Circuit Trail because they specifically pointed it out.
Right. Yep. And there's a section of Bay Circuit Trail off of Oak Hill Road that's never really in our radar, and it is up against some power lines, and it is some developable land. I think Framingham may be developing a piece of it that's kind of abutting that, so that may be what this is all about. It's behind the Staples development off of Route 9, so it could be related to some of that. So we can take a look at that.
Yeah. So Kat, I'd maybe just go back to the section, the more detailed section on open space in the 2008 plan.
Yep.
Actually see what it was that was being talked about that led to that recommendation.
I'll take a look. Thank you, Judith.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
So the next one, expand access to open spaces and water resources. There was a reference to non-motorized boats, although I will tell you from recent discussions with, I think it's NWRA at the Conservation Commission, is I think we want to hide into nothing with this one. But
is that, it's a, what did you use for a word?
Sorry, it's in English. What on a hiding to nothing, it basically means we haven't got a hope in hell of getting it done.
I agree 100%, and I'm all for, you know, a nice challenge, but this is backup water supply. We're not gonna make it. We're not gonna get access to it. We shouldn't ask for access to it. We should be grateful we have access to the trails. Yep. And I'm not saying that in a way that I'm not afraid of the challenge, but I think we should just start to reprioritize our objectives. We're grateful for the land we have. We have special trails that are in watershed property. We need to protect those. We're not going to have access to the water at this point. So that's it. And I think we should take it out.
Before we take it out, I totally agree with the water aspect about this, but do we want to somehow keep it in for maybe additional trails along?
Oh, to your point, yes, expand access to open spaces, yes, because that's what we're trying to do in the peninsula. Parcel of land, we're trying to expand open space. We're trying to put a public access plan in place to expand open space. So that piece is correct and good to go.
We
do have some reference already in the current plan about this expand access and connect space.
Yeah.
Should we add trails to that instead of water resources, just to make sure?
Yes, get rid of water resources.
Open space and trails.
Yeah.
Trail
Right, but
access.
to Kat and Karen's point, we already have some pretty specific recommendations around trails.
We kind of have this covered.
I do. I think.
I guess I kind of feel like
Not to add more.
the overall goal of this process, I think, if I'm not misunderstanding, is just to make sure there weren't any priorities here that we haven't already included that we had decided were important. I don't want to duplicate stuff you already have.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't
I
this
think it's covered too.
wouldn't this dovetail if we changed 37? I mean, wouldn't that also be a committee to
I
find?
think 37 is different. 37, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee should be a separate priority and objective, I think. It will dovetail with the trails, and we'd like a representative from the Trails Committee on that committee, obviously, to kind of work together, but it is kind of a separate objectives. And Westboro's recommendation was to have 2 separate committees for those 2 separate objectives.
All right.
If that helps.
Okay. So I think we're all in agreement. Get rid of the water reference in canoeing and non-motorized boats.
And I don't blame anyone for asking, because of course that's one of the first things I thought when I moved to Southborough. Look at all that water. Wow.
It's a swimming pool, right, Tom?
Only for large 140-pound animals.
Amphibious animal.
Amphibious.
Okay. So the next 3, I've just kind of put in peach here because Kristen has started working with the rec committee.
Yep. We have it.
On the next iteration of goals. So
That's right. We have a meeting on Tuesday, the 27th. It's a little less than a week, and that session is solely dedicated to this topic. So,
Great.
you know, there's a good, we went over, and there's, I think a good start to what we reviewed together, Judith. So I would expect coming out of that session, I'll have something to bring back to this team.
Excellent.
Hey, Kristen?
Awesome, Kristen.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there a specific outline or agenda for that, or is it just sort of a high-level view of what the plan would be, or?
No, the agenda itself, I actually just had it up to double check the date. I think we closed it, but it's just literally, oh, here it is. It's brainstorming, discussion, and decisions around goals and planning for Recreation Department.
Okay. One of the questions I've always had for rec, and I floated it a long time ago in the prior rec commission, I think, is that I got to believe that there is some sort of a way to, at a high level, establish what a community Southborough's size and demographics might consider a full complement of recreational resources. Like, how many kids are we going to have? Therefore, how many soccer teams and baseball teams and lacrosse teams, et cetera? What kind of field capacity do we need in a perfect world to be able to support what a good athletic recreation program might be? Other types of resources, et cetera, the swimming pools and you name it, hockey rinks, et cetera. What would that picture look like? And that's a little pie in the sky, certainly. On the other hand, if you don't have that longer term picture, it's hard to plan sometimes if you've got opportunities that come up to think about how the pieces fit together. So again, it's not something that I think is worth spending 80% of your time on, but I'd be very interested if there are rules of thumb, and Tim seems to be well plugged into the rec world as how people think about that stuff, and he might have some interesting models to say, for this size community, here is sort of the gold standard of what you might think about over the 20-year time horizon. And my experience is that that those things take forever, but it is very helpful to start socializing those concepts and get people sort of familiar with the idea before you actually try to take something to town meeting. And I think it's well worth having that sort of long-term picture out there for people to start thinking about, if that's something you guys can do without a huge amount of effort or detail necessarily. I think that could be very helpful. So my 2 cents worth.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a great point, and we have discussed it. The one challenge I put out there and seek feedback on, but not necessarily right now, outside the call, is that how do we 20 years out, the arguments we get at town meeting all the time or towards projects is that the student population is growing smaller, but 20 years from now, we're going to have a turnover, if you will, in the community, and we might find ourselves in the opposite direction. So I think that's a bit of a challenge, and obviously something we'd have to factor in, not asking to solve it now, but throw it out there in case Sammy or anyone else has thoughts that could assist us there.
Okay, yeah, good. A lot of variables, hard to predict, but again, I think it's worth thinking about. There may be some high level, things that come out of that seem to be fairly reliable to count on, and that would be useful to know if there are those and what they are. So
sure.
Yeah, I actually have a thought about that. So we just started working on the new capital planning subcommittee, school research subcommittee. I'm not sure the official name, but we've had one meeting. We have another meeting tomorrow night, actually, and that's one of the things we're looking at is what are the projections for enrollment. The enrollment has gone down slightly, not as much as was projected the last time this was really analyzed about seven years ago. There was a whole study done. So we're sort of refreshing that and looking at, how accurate the projections are. The current projections that this organization, NESDEC, has out, the projections do have the school enrollment going up over the next several years, despite the fact that it has been going down. But again, I think we're going to take a more detailed look at what are the factors they've looked at, and is there a way we can refine that a little bit so that we have a little more confidence. So we're very much actively doing that, and should have some good information within the next, I'm thinking the next couple of months. I mean, we're meeting, I think, every 2 weeks. So we're hoping to move along on it. So maybe there'll be something that will come out of that that'll be helpful.
great.
That would be, thank you.
Yeah.
Very helpful. And I think that that brings up, I think, another interesting point for me is that I think we have real opportunity to think with town and schools together on a lot of these issues. And recreation for me is one of those, in that the schools have a substantial amount of recreational resources there that obviously used heavily during the school year, less heavily during the summers. And so I think there's some real natural opportunity to plan together to figure out how we maximize the potential across the entire town for recreational resources, planning, utilization, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe hard to do organizationally, but I think it's worth investigating at least and thinking about ways to get some synergy there.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, 53 and 54. These are
Yes.
they're not really covered in there. I mean, there's a very general reference in sense of community to these two items. So I don't know if we want to add them back in again. Because sense of community is a little bit, we haven't got a lot of detail on that section right now.
So can I ask a question? I'm not as close to it. Do we have this highlighted already in our current plan?
No, there's a very general reference to.
I think we should add it. It's valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Kate Matson was working on nominating properties to the National Historic Places, wasn't she?
I think so.
So they may have already started.
The Fayetteville Dam is in the U.S. Historic Places or the National Registry, you may know.
The Historical Commission actually has spent some money to buy signs for people who have historic properties, I think. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about some of the historic register stuff. I'm not sure where that stands. Mm-hmm. I think that, to me, that's one of the interesting assets of the town. So I think it's worth keeping that in the planning process.
I agree. And the Trails Committee is hoping to install some signage that will highlight some of that along the new section of trail that would highlight the Fayetteville Dam Historic District too. So I think anywhere we can tie that into the town would be valuable information for people to get a hold of.
Which raises another sort of corollary point. Selectmen are actually starting to talk about the tricentennial, which comes in 19 or 2027.
You're such a planner.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what where that might fit here, but that might be an interesting thing to plug in to leverage a variety of these areas for that. I'm not going to be around for the quadricentennial, so I'd like to maybe be there for this one.
Live it up for this one.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't fit, but might be interesting to think about.
Well,
That's
how
a good
many?
goal for sense of community?
I think it's a great goal. And how many historic districts, or how many, what can we register that's relevant between now and then? Why not?
And maybe use that tricentennial as an opportunity to focus energy around making some of these things happen.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Okay. So reference to historic tax credits we've already got in the plan. This whole one around volunteer recruitment, volunteer recognition, I felt, Sam, looking at the goal 2 under Board of Selectmen goals, that this was pretty much covered.
Where are we now? The 56?
Yeah. It talks about training and
yeah.
I can't believe this is this is what Lisa and Chelsea, is that her name? I'm sorry.
Yep, Chelsea.
They're working on some of this stuff, right?
Yep, I think so.
It's brilliant and should be kept in here.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, and Judith, I don't think that the fact that it's on the Selectmen's goal list is any way conflicting with what we're doing. I mean, in fact, I'd rather look for the things that are on there, because that means there's some possibility that there may be some push to get them done, which we can take some credit for.
Yeah, this is great. I like 56 a lot.
I could have used 56 3 years ago, FYI.
Okay.
Actually, I could still use 50.
Okay. Right, 57, Scenic Roads Act. I don't know. I don't know who. I mean, when I look at some of these, I kind of go, well, who are we gonna give it to actually make it happen? And
a local photographer who's interested.
No, but sorry.
The historical committee sounds obvious.
This seems to be part of a broader issue of identifying either historical districts or scenic roads or something of that nature.
Historical assets.
So should we link into the tricentennial? If we try and link it in and say, here's all the things that we'd like to do before 2017.
Is this something we'd reach out to? Well, scenic roads, is that something that historical would be, is that something we reach out and see if it's something that would be of interest to them to take on?
Worth asking, certainly. And again, we have the ability to declare scenic roads. And I don't think we've done any in the last 50 years or thereabouts. But it's worth asking about and reevaluating, maybe.
Well, have all the roads been classified as scenic that will be now? And
no.
This is done.
In town meetings 74 and 75, there were warrant articles that selected 18 roads by my count that are scenic. And again, that protects the trees along them, and I don't know what else, but it's worth looking at again, I think, and I would ask the Historical Commission, for example, if they had an opinion about that.
Okay.
You mean in 1974 and 1975? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Yep.
That was the last time this came up?
That's the last time that I'm aware that town meeting voted to
wow.
Designate scenic roads.
Well, I guess the goal could be, do we want to go ahead and evaluate, are there any other scenic roads to be classified, or does this forever be removed from our goal list because everything's been tagged?
And sadly, I think the roads that were potential in 74 and 75 that didn't get classified have been, urbanized more over the last 50 years and probably less scenic now than they were then. So there may be some other candidates out there, and it's worth looking.
Yeah, there may be new roads and developments that are now scenic roads after 50 years.
I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Oh, there's one road in town where you can see the Boston skyline. Would that be scenic?
What road? Where?
Overlook.
Overlook
there
Road,
you
yeah.
go.
Overlook, okay, yeah.
I don't think that is a scenic road.
It's not on the list.
No.
Is Deerfoot on the list, Sam?
Part of Deerfoot is,
Yeah.
from a flag south, I think. I have no idea why they chose it there, but
I think Flag is too.
Flag is, yeah. Lover's Lane.
Okay. So 60, I don't know if, I know this feels like zoning to me. So Mimi, I don't know.
It's too broad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's redo the zoning code, basically.
Right.
Which needs to be done administratively, at least.
Well, shouldn't there be specific goals versus a broad brush? And maybe this is one of those that we could just remove and focus on more specific desires.
I would support that.
Okay. Revise and update demographic and land use. And if I put down to ask Karina, but in effect, we're doing that as part of the 2020 master plan. So I think that one can come out. Develop a database to reflect current land use trends to improve and update GIS. Well, the next three I couldn't find a reference to in the current plan, but are we?
That's very specific.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan of form-based codes.
Yeah.
It's a great concept, but practically, I just not confident how well it works.
This could open up a number of problems.
Yeah.
On 63,
yeah.
If we ever have town meeting, there's a warrant article to get rid of the development coordinating group.
Well, we take that one out then.
And I think that should pass. That's pretty uncontroversial.
Okay. And what about 64, 62 and 64? I mean,
the form-based codes seem pretty complicated to me.
I would not do 64. 62, I think, is a sort of an ongoing process that is useful to reinforce.
Agreed.
You can do that from space, though.
We're looking for volunteers to
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
okay.
report to the launch pad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, we need a database. There's probably, you can just hire some information from people who collect that information already.
Well, except there's a lot of, we have a GIS that needs some work.
Yeah,
I think.
Right.
And that is very valuable for planning purposes. So I think it's worth continuing to look to invest in that and update it.
Is that also used for tax purposes?
It's connected to the assessor's data, but my impression is there are things that we could do to improve that.
Okay. We'll keep that one in then. How about 65 and 66?
65 was related to rewriting the zoning code.
So we can take that out.
I mean, I don't mind 66, but it's hard to do, which is also part of the zoning code rewrite.
I mean, was this looked at as part of the rewrite and didn't get through?
I think there were things.
Yeah.
Rewrite. Yeah, this is complicated, and
Okay.
I would
Well, as we said, we've got an awful lot of other things that we can focus on that I think are much more actionable. So
take it out. Yeah.
okay. And then the last two, develop a master plan for use of CPA funds. I thought
What does
that
that actually mean? Because I thought CPA funds had their own definition. So what's a master plan for use of? Is that like it would be nice to do this in the next 10 to 20 years with CPA funds, like identify all the possible projects? Is that what that idea is?
So I think that, and I don't know if the CPC has ever been able to get people to do it, but I know that they were looking into having like open space and recreation and all the historical and things that CPA funds would apply to give like a goal list or a plan for the next 5 years. So they
I
would.
see
That's
targeting
interesting.
prioritization. So to
Yeah.
say for the housing piece, for example, working with SHOPC to say, here are the kind of projects that we think are important to fund in town out of all the 47 options that we might do. Open space, we want to focus on open space that has recreational opportunities as well as, just limited or passive recreation kind of stuff, et cetera. So things like that to help target investments.
So can I ask, if a plan were in place, would it help guide the committee to approve or not approve applications depending on whether they fit within that 5-year, 10-year priority list?
Ideally.
Is that what that would do?
But you don't want to be too dogmatic about it. But it would be. I think it'd be helpful to have people have a sense of, here are the things that we as a town think are important for these kinds of investments, versus things sort of float by the door and they grab them as opportunities arise.
And then another question is, how in depth does this master plan have to be after my experience on this committee? I'm certain it's right. And that's not a negative reflection, but I just want to make sure, because it's a big lift. So is this more of a 5 to 10 year plan that, is what they're looking for? And can that be more specific in the way it's defined so that it doesn't feel so impossible to accomplish?
I think CPC could do something like that. I mean, I think my sense of the structure is, if the master plan says this is an important thing to do and they buy into it, then they could sit down and sort of take it to the next level and wouldn't have to go, 6 levels down, but say, here are the 3 general principles that we think are important for open space, for housing, for whatever there. And I think that would be helpful, but again, CPC would have to, be on board and think it's important too.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think we should maybe ask CPC and see if they're interested in doing that instead of imposing upon them.
All right, well, let me reach out to Andrew, because he's our CPC rep. So,
but I think that's the philosophy for all of these things. I mean, we're not trying to dictate to people, but hopefully the representatives of various groups here will sort out, is this something that their particular committee is comfortable with and is willing to support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The last one. And
I wouldn't reach out to Andrew right away. He's got some family issues going on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, then. I'll just leave it in here and we can keep it like that. Okay. 69. I have no idea what that means.
I'm not sure I know either.
It's a financing plan. I think it's state funds or something. I'm not sure.
Ooh, let's get rid of it while we can, since no one knows what it is.
If it's state money, let's take it.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Well, I
take
think-
state money, but we just,
I mean, we have other goals towards looking for funding opportunities and
Right.
things. If no one knows what it means, why would we have it in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it out then.
it's an opportunity. to say-
Okay. So I guess maybe that's a good segue into Mimi. Has anyone been able to consult with their own boards and committees? I think I sent a note out with a revised document. Oh, can't see me. I've slid down the bed here. Hang on.
We've been looking at your ceiling for a long time now.
The top part of your hair.
It's the Hilton Garden Inn ceiling. I just want to point that out. It's actually rather unattractive. But
Oh, wow, nice.
Nice. So the Trails Committee met last week and we discussed the priorities that we had
yeah,
put
I
out.
see them. Thank
I
you.
sent you a quick email. So I think we're in complete agreement with most of what's included, but while we have, is Kristen still online? So we recognized one thing is that trails isn't really listed anywhere in the recreation section. And it's not that we want to artificially insert ourselves, but because we are nested under recreation, we thought it made logical sense to have some either redirection of existing goals and objectives into recreation if it made sense to recreation, or new goals if that also made sense. So we were going to wait to kind of have Kristen weigh in and have the commission decide on how they were going to approach that section, and then we were going to see if it made sense to reorder anything or add anything in there.
Yeah,
That
no,
was our-
absolutely. And I'll take that feedback back to our meeting on Tuesday. And then specifically, I'll circle back with you. And if we think for some reason a discussion between the two committees are needed, we can set that up, or maybe it won't be necessary and we can just pass on what we define.
Yeah.
And so in terms of open space as well, I think open space, trails, and rec, there's, in the plan and all, there's just a bit of overlap. And so the more that I think we're clear on kind of who's focusing on what, so we're not all working on the same stuff or leaving anything out, the better. But I feel confident we can do that, especially through this committee.
Absolutely.
And with Zoom, it could be pretty easy to set up a
Yeah.
subgroup discussion.
That's right.
Coordinate
That's
that,
right.
so.
I'll actually suggest that we'll add it, include it in the discussion. We already have the agenda set. And then maybe even the three of us could have a separate Zoom to share the output and decide if any further discussions needed.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kristen.
Zoom is not all bad.
It has its perks.
So is anyone, I'm just wondering if anyone else has had an opportunity to go back to their committee with the plan?
I'd like to review another 62 rows myself.
So similarly, Judith, I mentioned this in the last one. So we've talked about it as well in the Open Space Preservation Commission. And I think for the most part, we're pretty much in agreement. There may be a little bit of tweaky word stuff that Freddie may want to do at some point. And but she's gotten copies of everything and has reviewed it all, along with Sarah.
Great.
And I just want to comment that this exercise we just did was one of the most productive exercises I've experienced to date. So thank you for organizing that and going through it. It felt just so productive. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and it just really shows that we're like not missing anything because it's been such a long process. And I think for us to loop back to the work that we did in the very beginning and make sure we didn't leave anything out from the 2008 plan was yeah, really good.
Thank you.
Judith has done an excellent job organizing it for us too.
Yeah, thank you all.
Good work, Judith.
That was a good review for me
Excel queen.
as a new person.
Mad's clear.
So I could give a quick update on the
Is there
schools.
anything?
Yeah, that'd be great. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, so we're still in the process of coming up with the draft to present to the full committee. I should be meeting with Greg. I think next week we have a meeting set up, or finalizing a time. And, originally I had mentioned to this committee that what I was going to try to do was take our strategic plan, the school strategic plan, which was developed last year through a lot of work, and sort of translate that into a set of action items for the plan, for the master plan. And the more I looked at it, it's very, as it should be, academically oriented, and doesn't really include much of anything about how the schools interact with the town, other than to provide an excellent education for the, the children of the town. So what my revised draft incorporates are elements of the strategic plan, along with, I know Sam had done a lot of work with Roger last year. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, I think some of it was sort of brainstorming ways that the schools might possibly, sort of branch out to interact with town goals a little bit more. And I don't think that really came up in the strategic planning process. I think it was really very focused on actual education. And so I've been trying to think practically about, because the other thing that I've taken away from the meetings that I've attended so far, the MPC meetings, is that, the MPC, the master plan, really is not the thing that should be driving what the committees, what the goals of each individual committee are. At the same time, I think in our case, it may end up doing that a little bit, because otherwise we're not really, there really hasn't been an impetus to look at what, how the schools may interact with the town more broadly. So, anyway, that's just been a little bit more of a complex kind of reconciliation, and mostly in my own mind, as I've kind of gotten this organized, and hopefully, through talking with Greg and kind of coming up with a solid, I hope solid, reasonable proposal for the committee, we can look at it, and I think that we can put and I'm open to feedback on this too. I'd actually kind of like to hear feedback. I'm thinking about putting it in terms of, sort of presenting the school section in terms of, when we do long-term planning, also look at, would we want to incorporate this, when collaborating with the town on, capital planning, look at blah, 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 like that kind of thing, so that it's a little more open. And I think that might be maybe a little different from the sections from some of the other committees, at least as far as what I've heard, because it sounds like, there are maybe more appropriate areas to have concrete goals of this and that. I think when it comes to the schools, some of the goals with the town are going to be broader, and maybe I just beyond the scope of what I think we could sit and say, this is our goal right now. Like, yes, we want to have a daycare, or yes, we want to do continuing ed for adults, but, can we keep those things in mind? Can we sort of have them in front of us as something to consider when we're thinking about, other things as well. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense. That's sort of my thought process up to this point. So
that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And again, Couture, I think this group has heard Roger and my conversations about this thing, but the thing that I hope we keep in mind at some level, and I think that's what you're suggesting, is that I continue to see the schools as the logical sort of concentration point, management structure, or whatever, for what I describe as sort of community cohesiveness over the very long term, in terms of coordinating a lot of the social activity, educational activity that all families would be involved in. It's, I think, the logical place to collect information and disseminate information and coordinate activities, et cetera, et cetera. in what I think of as a fully integrated community social structure, if you will, social education, et cetera, going forward. And that is very long-term, very pie in the sky. But I think that it's an interesting vision to have out there and think about as we, look far to the future, and then think short term in ways that hopefully are at least consistent with that kind of view. Not that we have to go there at any particular speed, but it's like the old saying that for the person without a destination, any road will get you there, kind of thing. And so I would rather have a destination that people have thought about, and I think this group and other groups in town are capable of coming up with some great thinking about this kind of stuff. I think we've got a lot of good committees that can contribute substantially to that. That may not be the perfect vision, but something that is the result of sort of focused thought from very capable people, I think would be pretty useful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that that totally makes sense. And I think that, a lot of these things ultimately would come down to, this is probably a good time for us to be thinking about it, since we're sort of embarking on this capital planning analysis, which I know is broader than the schools. It's, encompasses a lot of the buildings in town. And so I think it's a good time for that. I also think you're right, Sam, that it is good to keep in mind. I think a lot of the things, it comes down to funds, and
Sure.
and budget, and even coordinating something requires staffing and space and all of that, obviously. So, but to have it in mind, and then to have it integrated into the master plan where we know it's already consistent with town goals, is not a bad thing. And you can kind of, we can see how it all unfolds over time.
Great.
Okay.
Have we had enough fun?
I just wanted to ask William if there's anything from technology that we should add to the master plan, any of their goals or things that have been missed.
We've discussed this, and it seems like we're not really necessarily a leader in terms of what having objectives, except to support the community with whatever technology makes sense at the time. Technology is always changing, and the needs of the community are always changing. So, we want to make certain that the technology keeps up with the community and meets its needs.
And Will, I guess I see technology as a core sort of piece of infrastructure for that longer term vision that I just described, in terms of making sure that people's issues are connected and integrated in ways that make them manageable and allow people to make progress toward whatever goals are important for them out there.
So I agree. What I would just say is that technology really has to be responsive to what the requirements are. It's hard to anticipate, what those might be, and more than, let's say, just a few months or, at most a year in advance.
Sure.
But it would all be Zooming, like a year ago.
That's right.
20 years ago, we didn't have the internet. Think about what's that done for us. Crazy.
Wow. That's crazy.
I'll date myself. I'm a product of the old purple mimeograph machines way back when. I remember when that was very exciting. You could make a lot of copies of something.
I go back further than that.
I was easily impressionable.
I appreciate that.
Can't hear you, Mimi.
Can we move on to minutes? Is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss?
Minutes look good to me.
Yep, minutes are good.
Yep. I make the motion to approve the minutes of September 23rd.
Second.
All in favor, roll call. Watson?
Yes.
Luttrell, yes. Stivers?
Yes.
Sines?
Yes.
McKee? Davidovich?
Yes.
Markalier?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
LeVault?
Just quick question. I really should know this. I was not in attendance at the last meeting, so do I vote or not?
You may vote.
Yes.
Mimi, you're muted. There you go.
Warren?
Yes.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Our tentative meeting date for our next meeting was November 18th. Is that still okay with everyone?
Let me just check the count. When is that the week before Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Yep.
Do we have homework before then?
I think we still got to continue. Like in my case, I do have a scheduling with Shopsy in this meeting. So hopefully by next meeting, I will be able to present to Shopsy, as Sarah's smiling because she knows the conflict. Shopsy's meetings are 8 o'clock the next day, so
Yep.
8 o'clock in the morning. So the stuff, Judith, you did, unless you were a miracle worker and got it to me like 7:30 the next day, I had to wait. So we're hoping to get that done. So the Shopsy one will be reviewed. It's all basically long-winded to say, I'll have an update next meeting. Way long-winded.
Where are we in terms of the Board of Selectmen starting to look at this? Have you and Lisa been able to schedule anything in yet?
Excuse me, Judith, you broke up there. What was the question?
Where were we in terms of you and Lisa being able to share this, work to date with the Board of Selectmen?
I've actually not talked about that with Lisa, so we need to huddle and figure that one out. I don't know. The interesting news is that the Board of Selectmen agendas are actually getting very crowded as we're trying to talk with the various committees. So I think that we may actually work that in under the member reports section, which gives us some flexibility there. And I want to just figure out with Lisa who's going to say what.
Good luck.
Well, fortunately, I can get a few words in before Marty shuts me off. So. But I have to work hard at it. Muted again, Mimi.
I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved. 14 people, unanimous.
Second.
Paul Watson.
Yes.
Luttrell, yes. Stivers.
Yes.
Yes.
McKee.
Yes.
Davidovich.
Yes.
Markalier.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
Vault.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That was a very productive meeting.
Great
Really
meeting.
good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Very good.
Have a great week.
See you next
Where
time.
are you off to now, Judith?